I'm recording this because the station is still broadcasting. Not the weather, not anymore, something else. If you live anywhere within range of NOAA frequency 162.475, the one assigned to a decommissioned agricultural relay station in Pawnee County, Kansas, turn it off. Don't listen to it. Don't try to match the signal. And whatever you do, don't write down what it says, because that's how it starts to know your name. I worked the overnight shift at that station for 11 days. 11 days. That's all it took to change me into someone who checks the wind direction before opening a door and who hasn't slept without a light on in 9 months. I quit. I drove home. I moved 4 states away. But last Tuesday, I found a black notebook in the glove compartment of my truck. A notebook I know I left locked inside the station's filing cabinet on my last night. It was open to a page I'd never written on, and in handwriting that was almost mine. Almost, but not quite. There was a single line: "Your report is overdue. I need to tell someone what happened at Relay Station 31 Kilo before whatever is keeping count decides I've waited too long. My name is Cole Barrera. 9 months ago, I was 31, recently divorced, and running out of savings faster than I wanted to admit to anyone, especially my mother, who had offered her guest room in Hutchinson with that specific gentle tone that means she already knew things were bad. I'd been a field technician for a regional telecom company for 6 years, until they eliminated my position in a round of cuts that everybody saw coming, except the people it actually happened to. I spent 3 months applying for anything that would keep me in my apartment in Wichita. Warehouse, delivery, data entry. I even drove out to a meatpacking plant in Dodge City for an interview that ended when the foreman looked at my resume and asked me if I was serious. So when I found the listing on a state employment board, overnight monitoring technician, NOAA cooperative relay station, Pawnee County, 7-day initial contract with renewal option, $23 per hour, housing provided. I didn't ask questions. $23 an hour for a night shift in the middle of nowhere meant silence, solitude, and a paycheck. That was enough. The posting was sparse. Monitor automated weather instruments, log readings, maintain equipment, transmit scheduled reports. No degree required, no experience required. Just a willingness to work 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. alone in a federal relay station 40 minutes from the nearest town. I applied on a Monday. I got a call on Wednesday from a man who identified himself as Regional Coordinator Lyle Denton. He spoke slowly and clearly, like someone accustomed to leaving voicemails that needed to be understood on the first listen. He confirmed the basics, the hours, the pay, the location. He told me the station was largely automated, that my role was supervisory, and that all I needed to bring was clothing and a personal vehicle. The station had a small bunk room for sleeping between shifts if I wanted to stay on site, which he recommended, given the distance from anything. I asked him one question. I asked why the position was open. He paused for exactly long enough that I noticed the pause, and then he said, "The previous technician completed his contract and chose not to renew." That was the last time I spoke to Lyle Denton, or anyone associated with the station, until I arrived. The drive from Wichita took just under 3 hours. I left in the late afternoon so I could arrive before dark and get oriented. The route took me west on US 56, then south on a county road that didn't have a name, only a number, 1140, and finally onto a gravel track that my GPS simply stopped acknowledging. The last 15 minutes I drove by the printed directions Denton had mailed me. Mailed, not emailed. A physical envelope with typed directions, a gate code, and a single key on a plain ring with a stamp tag that read 31-K. The land out there is flat in a way that changes your sense of proportion. There are no trees to anchor your depth perception, no buildings on the horizon, just grass, sky, and the slow curve of the earth itself. By the time I turned onto the gravel track, I could see the station from maybe 2 miles out, a low concrete building with a radio mast and a cluster of weather instruments on the roof, sitting alone in a field of switchgrass like something left behind after an evacuation. The gate was chain link, 8 feet tall, topped with plain wire, no barbed wire, no cameras. I entered the code, 73104, and the gate rolled open on a track. I drove through, parked next to a small concrete pad, and sat in my truck for a minute, just looking at the building. It was unremarkable. Government gray walls, a single metal door, 2 small windows, both dark, a faded NOAA emblem painted on the wall near the entrance, the kind of thing that hadn't been retouched in at least a decade. The weather instruments on the roof, anemometer, rain gauge, temperature shield looked functional, but old. The radio mast was maybe 60 feet tall, with a red aviation light blinking at the top. I used the key on the metal door and stepped inside. The interior was cleaner than I expected. A small entrance corridor led to the main monitoring room, which contained a long desk with 2 computer terminals, a radio console, a printer, and a wall of equipment racks. Everything was powered on. The screens displayed scrolling data: wind speed, barometric pressure, temperature, humidity, all updating in real time. The radio console had a green indicator light and a low, steady hiss of static. To the left was a small kitchen with a microwave, a mini fridge, and a coffee maker. Beyond that, the bunk room, just a cot, a lamp, and a metal locker, a bathroom with a shower stall. Everything institutional, everything functional. On the main desk, centered between the 2 terminals, was a manila folder. I assumed it was an orientation packet. I set my bag down, poured myself a glass of water from the kitchen tap, and sat in the desk chair. The chair was old, the kind with fabric armrests worn smooth by years of use. It smelled faintly like someone else's sweat, which is a small detail, but it bothered me. It reminded me that someone had sat here before me, doing exactly this, and had chosen to leave. I opened the folder. Inside was a single sheet of typed paper, a station log with the last 30 days of entries, and a smaller envelope. The typed sheet was titled Relay Station 31 Kilo Overnight Monitoring Protocol. Below that, it read, "This document supplements standard NOAA operating procedures. These instructions are specific to Station 31 Kilo and must be followed exactly during all overnight shifts, 2200 to 0600. Failure to comply with any instruction will be noted in the station record." Then came the rules. There were 9 of them. I'll give you the first 5 now, because those are the ones I read that first evening while the light was still coming through the windows, and I could still tell myself this was just a quirky government posting with an overcautious manual. 1. At the start of each shift, log the current readings from all instruments manually. Do not rely on the automated display. If the manual readings and the automated readings disagree, record the manual readings only and mark the automated readings as uncalibrated. Do not attempt to correct the automated system. 2. The radio console will receive periodic transmissions on the station frequency. Most of these are automated. If you receive a transmission that includes a human voice reading a forecast, do not relay it, do not log it, do not respond to it. Genuine forecasts are transmitted as digital data packets only. A human voice reading a forecast is not a genuine transmission. 3. Between 0100 and 0300, the anemometer on the roof may register wind speeds that do not match observable conditions. This is a known calibration variance. Log the readings as displayed, but add the note, "Instrument drift, no correction applied." Do not go onto the roof to inspect the anemometer during this window. 4. If the barometric pressure drops more than 4 millibars in any 15-minute period, check the pressure sensor manually. If the manual reading confirms the drop, close and lock the exterior door, turn off the monitoring room's overhead lights, and use only the desk lamp until the pressure stabilizes. You may continue your duties during this time. 5. The station log must be updated every hour on the hour. Each entry must include the time, date, and your initials. If you notice an entry in the log that you did not write, do not cross it out. Do not correct it. Copy it exactly into your next entry and continue as normal. I read these 5 rules and felt something I can only describe as the very early edge of unease. Not fear, not yet, but the quiet awareness that something about this situation was being managed. These weren't standard procedures. Standard procedures don't tell you to sit in the dark when the pressure drops. Standard procedures don't warn you about voices on the radio that aren't real. But I'd spent 6 years as a telecom tech. I'd worked in remote equipment shelters and unmanned relay huts. Every site has its quirks. Every operations manual has a section that reads like superstition to someone who doesn't know the technical history. I told myself this was that, an old station with old equipment and a set of workarounds that someone had written up in language that was a little more dramatic than necessary. I set the first page aside and looked at the station log. The entries were neat and consistent, each one time-stamped and initialed. The previous technician had used the initials MEH. Every entry followed the same format: time, date, initials, readings, and occasional notes. I flipped through the pages. The notes were sparse. Winds calm. No transmissions. Pressure steady. But on the 9th page, about 3 weeks into the previous technician's tenure, the notes changed. The entry for 0200 on March 14th read, 0200, March 14th, MEH, wind, 0 miles per hour, temp, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, pressure, 1012 millibars, humidity, 67%. Note, entry at 0100 not mine, copied as directed. See below. And below it, in the same handwriting but pressed harder into the paper, was a duplicate of the 0100 entry. 0100, March 14th, MEH, wind, 0 miles per hour, temp, 38 degrees Fahrenheit, pressure, 1012 millibars, humidity, 67%. Technician noted for retention. File updated. Technician noted for retention. File updated. I stared at those words for a long time. The handwriting was identical to every other entry. Same pen. Same hand, but the phrasing was wrong. It didn't sound like something a weather technician would write. It sounded administrative, procedural, like something from a personnel record. I picked up the smaller envelope that had been inside the folder. It was sealed, and on the front, someone had written in ballpoint pen, "Open only if you find the notebook." I put the envelope in my jacket pocket and checked the time. It was 9:47 p.m. My shift started in 13 minutes. I stood up, walked the perimeter of the station one more time, checked the locks, checked the windows, checked the instruments on the roof. From the ground, I could see the anemometer turning slowly in a light breeze, the cups catching the last gray light, and then I came back inside, sat down at the desk, and began my first shift. For the first 2 hours, nothing happened. The instruments ran, the data scrolled, the radio hissed. I logged the readings at 2200 and 2300, both times checking the manual instruments against the automated display. They matched. I wrote my entries in the log and initialed them CAB. At 2340, the radio crackled. I looked at the console. The green indicator light was still steady. No transmission code on the display. No data packet incoming. Then a voice came through the speaker. Calm, measured, male, a flat Midwestern accent. It said, "This is the National Weather Service forecast for Pawnee County and surrounding areas, issued at 11:40 p.m. Central. Overnight, expect clearing skies with lows near 42 degrees. Winds from the south-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. No precipitation expected." It sounded completely normal. It sounded exactly like a weather forecast, the kind you'd hear on any NOAA radio. But Rule 2 was explicit. A human voice reading a forecast is not a genuine transmission. I did not relay it. I did not log it. I did not respond to it. The voice continued for another 30 seconds, adding regional forecasts, agricultural outlooks, and a frost advisory for 2 neighboring counties. Then it stopped, and the static returned. I sat very still. Because here's the thing. I'd already checked the automated forecast data before my shift. The actual forecast for Pawnee County that night called for overcast skies, lows near 36, and north winds at 15 to 20. Not clearing skies. Not 42 degrees. Not south-southwest. The voice on the radio hadn't just been a voice. It had been wrong, confidently, specifically, calmly wrong. And if I hadn't checked the real data first, if I hadn't followed Rule 1 and logged the manual readings, I wouldn't have known. That was the first moment I understood that the rules weren't quirks. They were a system. And the system existed because something at this station was actively trying to feed me false information. I opened the manila folder again and read the remaining 4 rules. The remaining 4 rules were typed on the back of the same sheet. I don't know how I missed them the first time. I could have sworn the back of the page was blank when I first pulled it from the folder. But there they were, in the same typeface, the same formatting, the same clinical tone. 6. The filing cabinet in the northeast corner of the monitoring room contains station records dating back to the facility's original commission. You may review these records if you wish, but do not remove any file from the cabinet between 0100 and 0400. If you are holding a file when the clock strikes 0100, return it immediately and close the cabinet drawer. Do not reopen it until 0400. 7. If the printer activates without a command input, do not read the output immediately. Allow the printed page to sit on the tray for a minimum of 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, you may read it. If it contains weather data, file it normally. If it contains a name, place the page inside the filing cabinet in the folder labeled Pending and do not reference it in the station log. 8. Between 0300 and 0400, you may hear a tapping sound on the exterior door. This is caused by thermal contraction of the metal frame in overnight temperature drops. Do not open the door. Do not look through the window nearest the door. Continue your duties at the desk. 9. At the end of your shift, before you leave, check the bottom drawer of the desk. If there is a black notebook inside, do not open it. Place it in the filing cabinet, bottom drawer, behind the folder labeled Completed. If the notebook is not in the desk drawer, do nothing. I read Rule 9 twice. A black notebook. I thought about the sealed envelope in my jacket pocket. Open only if you find the notebook. And something tightened in my chest. Not panic, not even fear exactly. Just the recognition that the previous technician, MEH, had known about the notebook, had anticipated that I would find it, had left me instructions contingent on that discovery, which meant the notebook wasn't always in the desk. It appeared, or it moved, or someone put it there between shifts. I checked the bottom drawer. It was empty, just bare metal with a thin layer of dust. I closed it and returned to the instruments. At midnight, I logged my readings. Manual and automated matched. I initialed the entry and noted no anomalies. The radio was silent. The wind outside had died to nothing I could see through the window, that the anemometer had stopped turning entirely. The grass beyond the fence was motionless. No insects, no coyotes, just the low electrical hum of the equipment and the static on the radio. At 0024, the printer activated. The sound startled me more than it should have. It was just a standard thermal printer, the kind that produces continuous roll paper, and it began feeding out a strip about 8 inches long. Then it stopped. Rule 7. Don't read it immediately. Wait 5 minutes. I looked at the clock on the wall. 0024. I would wait until 0029. Those 5 minutes were the first time I experienced what I'd later come to think of as the station's specific breed of silence. It wasn't just an absence of sound. It was a density. The air in the room felt closer, thicker, as though the walls had drawn in by a few inches. The hum of the equipment seemed to lower in pitch. I became aware of my own breathing in a way that made me conscious of the effort of it, the mechanical reality of air entering and leaving my body. At 0029, I pulled the strip from the printer tray. It was not weather data. In small, clean dot matrix type, it read, Harmon, Miles Edward Technician Station, 3, 1-K contract, February 28th to March 28th. Status, retention initiated file, 3, 1-K/P-O. 047, Miles Edward Harmon, MEH, the previous technician. I looked at the filing cabinet in the northeast corner of the room. It was a standard 4-drawer steel cabinet, government beige, with small label holders on each drawer. The labels read, from top to bottom, current, historical, pending, completed. Rule 7 told me what to do. The printout contained a name. I was supposed to place it in the folder labeled pending. I walked to the cabinet and pulled open the 3rd drawer. Inside were several manila folders, each with a typed label. Most were weather-related seasonal summaries, equipment maintenance logs, calibration records. Near the back, I found the one labeled pending. It was thick, much thicker than it should have been. I opened it and placed the printout inside, on top of the existing stack. As I did, I glanced at the page beneath it. Same format, different name. Callaway, Janet R. Technician Station 31-K Contract, January 15th to February 14th. Status, retention. Initiated file 31-K/P-0046. Beneath that, another and another. I didn't count them all. The folder held at least 30 pages, maybe 40. Each one a name, a contract period, and the same phrase, retention initiated. Every single person who had worked at this station was in this folder, filed, cataloged, marked for something called retention. I closed the folder. I closed the drawer. I checked the clock. 0033. I still had almost half an hour before the 0100 cutoff for the filing cabinet. I should have stopped there. I should have gone back to the desk, logged my readings, and followed the rules exactly as written. But I want to be honest with you. I want to tell this the way it actually happened, not the way I wish it had happened. I opened the top drawer current and looked inside. There were only 2 items. The first was a single page with the station's operating parameters, its FCC license number, its NOAA Cooperative Agreement, ID, standard documentation. The second was a page I hadn't seen before. It was newer than the others. The paper was whiter, the type darker. It read, Barrera, Cole Anthony Technician Station, 31-K Contract, April 3rd to April 10th. Status, monitoring file 31-K/P-0048 *. My file, already created, already numbered. Status, monitoring, not retention, monitoring, like I was being observed, evaluated, like whatever process had claimed every previous technician was watching me to see if I qualified. I put the page back. I closed the drawer. I returned to the desk. I want to tell you I considered leaving. I want to tell you I weighed the options rationally, the paycheck against the risk, the practical against the impossible. But the truth is simpler and more embarrassing than that. I didn't leave because I didn't yet believe that anything in that cabinet could actually hurt me. Papers with my name on them, strange printouts, a radio voice with a wrong forecast, these were unsettling, but they were also just information, data. The station was an information system, and information systems can be gamed, corrupted, manipulated. Nothing had touched me. Nothing had appeared in the room. No door had opened on its own. No shadow had moved. I told myself there was a rational explanation. A former employee with a grudge, a hazing protocol, a psych evaluation built into the contract that nobody had told me about. I stayed. At 0058, I remembered Rule 6. The filing cabinet was off limits from 0100 to 0400. I was already at the desk, already clear of the cabinet, but I looked over at it anyway, across the room, and I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On the side of the cabinet, facing the wall, partially hidden by the equipment rack beside it, there was a small symbol, a triangle, stamped or etched into the metal, filled in with what looked like silver paint. It was no larger than a quarter, old. The paint was chipped at the edges, worn down to bare metal in places. A silver triangle. The clock on the wall clicked to 0100, and I heard the filing cabinet lock, not metaphorically, not in the sense that I felt it was off limits. I heard a mechanical sound, a deep metallic thunk from inside the cabinet, like a bolt sliding into place, like a lock engaging from within a cabinet that, as far as I could see, had no lock. I logged my 0100 reading. The instruments were normal. I wrote my initials. I noted nothing unusual because the rules hadn't told me to note the cabinet locking. The rules had told me to stay away from it, and I was staying away from it. And I was beginning to understand that the rules were not suggestions or precautions. They were the architecture of survival in this place. They described the boundaries of a space that was safe, and everything outside those boundaries was something I was not equipped to face. At 01:15, the radio crackled again. Same voice, same calm, flat tone. But this time, it wasn't a forecast. Station 31-Kilo, this is regional coordination. We show a technician on site. Please confirm status. Rule 2 covered forecasts specifically. It said nothing about other types of voice transmissions. I looked at the rule sheet again, searching for guidance. There was nothing. The rules didn't address the situation. I didn't respond. I don't know if that was the right choice. I just knew that the voice had come from the same speaker, on the same frequency, with the same quality as the false forecast. And if the forecast had been a lie, this could be one too. The voice spoke again after about 30 seconds. Station 31-Kilo, confirming technician Cole Barrera on site. Status, monitoring, shift nominal, no action required. It knew my name. Then the static returned, and the green indicator light held steady, and the room was quiet again. I pressed my palms flat against the desk and made myself breathe. In and out, slowly, the way you do when you're trying to convince your body that the thing your mind is screaming about isn't real, except it was real. The voice was real. The radio was real. My name coming through a government weather frequency at 1 in the morning in an empty station in the middle of Kansas was real. At 01:37, I noticed something on the rules sheet. I'd left it on the desk, face up, the first 5 rules visible. I'd read them multiple times. I knew them, but now, between Rule 2 and Rule 3, there was a new line. Same typeface, same spacing, as though it had always been there and I had simply overlooked it. 2A. If a voice transmission addresses you by name, do not respond. If it confirms your status as monitoring, remain at your desk and continue standard duties. If it confirms your status as retention initiated, open the bottom drawer of the desk immediately. I read it 3 times. It had not been there before, I was certain. I had read these rules less than 3 hours ago, and there had been no Rule 2A. The rules were changing. The voice had called my status monitoring, not retention initiated. According to 2A, I was to remain at my desk and continue standard duties, which is what I was already doing. The rule described my exact situation and told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing. But the other option, the one for retention initiated, told me to open the bottom drawer, the drawer that, according to Rule 9, might contain the black notebook. The drawer I had already checked, the drawer that had been empty. I checked it again. I leaned down and pulled it open, already knowing it would be empty. It wasn't empty. Inside the drawer, sitting perfectly centered on the bare metal, was a notebook, black cover, slightly larger than a standard composition book, and on the front, embossed into the material, small and precise, a silver triangle. For a long time, I didn't touch it. Rule 9 was explicit. Do not open it. Place it in the filing cabinet, bottom drawer, behind the folder labeled Completed. But the filing cabinet was locked. It had locked itself at 0100 and wouldn't be accessible until 0400. I couldn't follow Rule 9. The timing made it impossible, which meant either the rule system had a flaw or the notebook was meant to stay with me during exactly this window. From 100 to 400, when the cabinet was sealed, the notebook was in my possession, and the rules couldn't tell me what to do with it, except the envelope. The previous technician's envelope, still in my jacket pocket. Open only if you find the notebook. I pulled the envelope out. My hands were steady. I want you to know that. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was functioning. I was calm. The kind of calm that isn't peace, but is instead the absence of any useful emotional response. The flat numbness that comes when your situation has exceeded your ability to react to it. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single index card, handwritten, small, tight letters. If you found the notebook, the station has already started your file. Don't panic. The rules will protect you if you follow them, but the rules will also change. When they change, the old versions are still true. The new versions are also true. Both apply, even when they contradict. Do not try to resolve the contradictions. Just follow whichever version keeps you at the desk, away from the door, and away from the cabinet between 1 and 4. The notebook is the record. Everything that happens at the station goes into it. I don't know how. I never opened it. Don't open it. One more thing, the voice on the radio is not a person. It's not a recording. It's the station itself. The station is talking to you because the station is aware of you. The forecast is the lure. The status check is the acknowledgement. If your status ever changes from monitoring to retention initiated, your contract has already been extended. You won't be allowed to leave. I'm sorry I didn't warn you before you started. I didn't know how to explain it in a way that wouldn't sound insane. Good luck. Miles Harmon. I put the card down on the desk next to the notebook. I looked at the clock. 1:53. At 0200, I logged my readings. The instruments were behaving strangely. The anemometer showed wind at 31 miles per hour. I looked out the window. The grass was perfectly still, not a blade moving. Rule 3 covered this instrument drift between 0100 and 0300. I logged the readings as displayed and added the required note. Instrument drift. No correction applied. The automated display, meanwhile, showed wind at 0. The first time all night, the manual and automated readings disagreed. Rule 1 told me to log the manual readings and mark the automated as uncalibrated. But the manual readings were the false ones. I was looking out the window at dead calm air while the anemometer reported a gale. The automated system was correct. The instruments on the roof were lying, and the rules told me to trust the lying instruments over the truthful screen. I followed the rules. I logged 31 miles per hour. I marked the automated system as uncalibrated. I wrote it all down in the station log with my initials, and as I finished the entry, I understood something that Miles Harmon's note had tried to tell me. The rules didn't protect me by keeping me safe. They protected me by keeping me useful. As long as I was following the rules, I was doing what the station needed: logging, recording, filing, feeding data into a system. The rules were a job description, and the job was to participate in the station's record keeping, to add my observations, my initials, my name, my presence to the archive. The archive wasn't just a collection of old files. It was growing, it was active, and every entry I made in the station log was another line in it. At 0247, I heard the first tapping. Rule 8 said it would come between 0300 and 0400. It was early, 13 minutes early. A soft, irregular knock on the exterior door. Not rhythmic, not mechanical. The kind of pattern that sounds like knuckle, like someone standing outside in the dark, tapping politely, waiting to be let in. The rule said it was thermal contraction. The rule said, don't open the door. The rule said, don't look through the window nearest the door. I didn't open the door. I didn't look through the window, but I listened. And between the taps, in the gaps of silence, I heard something the rule hadn't mentioned. Breathing, slow and measured, just outside the metal door. The steady, patient respiration of something that was not in a hurry. The tapping continued for 14 minutes. Then it stopped. At 0300, I logged my readings. My hands were still steady. The anemometer still read high winds. The grass was still motionless. I wrote it all down. At 0312, the printer activated again. I waited 5 minutes. At 0317, I pulled the strip. It read, Barrera, Cole Anthony, Technician Station, 31-K status update, monitoring active. Note, subject responsive to protocol, shift retention probability, elevated, not initiated, elevated. I filed the printout in pending. Then I stopped. I looked at the filing cabinet. It should have been locked. It was supposed to be locked until 0400. The drawer had opened without resistance. No thunk, no bolt, as if it had never been locked at all. Or, as if when the station needed me to file something, the lock simply didn't apply. The rules said I couldn't access the cabinet between 0100 and 0400, but Rule 7 said to file printouts with names in pending. Two rules, directly contradicting each other, and I had followed Rule 7 without thinking, because the action felt automatic, because filing was what the station needed me to do. I closed the drawer quickly, stepped back, and returned to the desk. I sat down. I put my hands flat on the surface. I looked at the black notebook sitting beside me, its silver triangle catching the light from the desk lamp. I did not open it, but I noticed something I hadn't before. The edges of the pages inside were not uniform. Some were white, some were yellowed, some had a faint gray tint like newspaper, and near the spine, just barely visible, I could see the edge of a photograph, the white border of a Polaroid tucked between the pages. The clock read 03:31. I had less than 3 hours until my shift ended. Less than 3 hours until daylight, until I could walk outside and get in my truck and drive away from this place and never come back. But I already knew I wouldn't do that. Not because of the paycheck, not because of the contract, because my file was already in the cabinet. My name was already on the printouts. My initials were in the station log, next to readings I had dutifully recorded, including the ones I knew were false. I was already part of the record. The question was no longer whether I was in the archive. The question was what status the archive would assign me, and whether I could keep it at monitoring long enough to find a way out that didn't exist for the 47 people filed before me. At 0400, the filing cabinet unlocked with a heavy thunk, and in the station log, beneath my most recent entry, in handwriting that was almost mine, almost but not quite a new line, had appeared. Technician is performing well. Retention review scheduled for night 4. I didn't sleep that first morning. When 0600 came and my shift ended, I walked outside into pale gray light and stood in the grass for 10 minutes, just breathing air that didn't feel watched. The sun was low and the sky was overcast, and the wind, real wind, not the phantom gale the anemometer had reported, moved through the switchgrass in slow waves. I could hear meadowlarks. I could hear the gravel under my boots. Ordinary sounds. The kind you never think about until you've spent 8 hours in a place where silence has texture. I drove into Larned, the nearest town with a gas station, and sat in the parking lot eating a microwave burrito and telling myself I would not go back. I had my phone. I could call Denton, tell him the station was unfit, tell him I was done. One night's pay at $23 an hour was $184. I could survive without it, but I kept thinking about the pending folder. 40-something names, 40-something people who had worked overnight shifts at that station, and whose files all said the same thing: retention initiated. What did that mean for them? Where were they now? Miles Harmon had left a note in an envelope, which meant he'd gotten out. His status had been retention initiated, according to the log entry I'd found, but he'd still managed to leave, or had he? He said he chose not to renew. Denton said the same, but Miles's note hadn't sounded like someone who'd simply finished a contract and moved on. It sounded like someone who'd escaped. And my file said monitoring, not retention, monitoring. Like I was still in the evaluation phase, like the station hadn't decided what to do with me yet. I drove back. I slept on the cot for 5 hours, and at 2200, I started my second shift. Nights 2 and 3 followed the same pattern, with small escalations that I dutifully logged. The false forecast came every night, always on a slightly different schedule, always wrong in specific ways. Temperatures off by 6 or 7 degrees, wind directions reversed, precipitation predicted for clear skies. I never relayed them. The printer produced a status update each night. My probability remained elevated. The tapping came between 0300 and 0400 on both nights, and both times I heard the breathing behind the door, slow and patient. And both times I stayed at the desk. On night 3, Rule 2, A changed. I noticed it at 0130. I'd been reviewing the rule sheet. I did this hourly now, checking for alterations and the text of 2A, which had previously addressed voice transmissions that used my name, now read, 2A. If a voice transmission addresses you by name and reads a series of numbers, copy the numbers into the station log. These are file reference codes. Do not search for the files they reference. Do not attempt to correlate them with existing records. Log them and continue your shift. The old version, the one about monitoring versus retention initiated, was gone. Not crossed out, not amended, simply replaced, as though the new text had always been there. But I remembered the old version. I remembered it clearly. And Miles Harmon's note had warned me, when they change, the old versions are still true. The new versions are also true. Both apply, even when they contradict. So I held both in my mind. If a voice says my name and confirms my status, follow the old 2A. If a voice says my name and reads numbers, follow the new 2A, both real, both active. The rulebook wasn't being corrected. It was accumulating. On night 4, the retention review happened. I know that because of the entry that appeared in the station log at 0100 in that handwriting that mimicked mine. It said, Retention Review Night 4, Technician Barrera, CA. Assessment, cooperative, consistent, responsive to rule modification. Recommendation, extend monitoring period. Retention not yet warranted. Note, subject has not opened the notebook. This is favorable. I read it and felt two things simultaneously. Relief because retention was not yet warranted, and a crawling, sick awareness that the word favorable implied the station approved of my obedience. I was being graded, not just monitored, graded. And the fact that I hadn't opened the black notebook was part of my score. The notebook was still on the desk. I hadn't moved it since night 1. Every night I placed it in the same spot, to the right of the keyboard, its silver triangle facing up. I hadn't opened it. I hadn't put it in the filing cabinet because I was afraid to interact with the cabinet more than the rules required. So it just sat there, present, waiting, like a test I hadn't taken yet. On night 5, the rules sheet had a 10th rule. 10. If, during your shift, you find a Polaroid photograph anywhere in the station, turn it face down immediately. Do not study the image. Place it inside the black notebook between any 2 pages. If the notebook is not accessible, place the photograph in the bottom drawer of the desk and close the drawer. I hadn't found any photograph, but the rule's existence meant I might. And I remembered the Polaroid edge I'd glimpsed inside the notebook on my first night, the white border visible near the spine. Photographs were going into the notebook. Someone or something was placing them there, and Rule 10 was telling me to participate, to add to the collection, to feed the archive with images, the way my log entries fed it with data. Night 6 was quiet, almost peaceful. The instruments behaved. The radio was silent. No printer output, no tapping at the door. I logged my readings every hour, checked the rule sheet, checked the filing cabinet at 0400 when it unlocked. Everything normal. It was the quietest night I'd had, and it was the most frightening, because I couldn't shake the feeling that the station was resting, conserving something, preparing for whatever came next. On night 7, my last contracted night, I arrived at the station at 21:45. 15 minutes early, and found the exterior door standing open. It had never been open when I arrived. I always unlocked it myself. I stood outside, looking at it. The metal door swung inward, about 2 feet, darkness beyond, the monitoring room lights off, and I felt, for the first time all week, a clear and physical urge to run. Not unease, not dread, animal fear, the kind that starts in your legs before your brain catches up. I didn't run. I stepped inside and turned on the lights. Everything was where I'd left it. The desk, the terminals, the radio, the filing cabinet, the black notebook, right side of the keyboard, silver triangle up, the rule sheet in the manila folder. But the chair, my chair, the old one with the worn fabric armrests, was turned to face the filing cabinet instead of the desk, as though someone had been sitting in it, looking at the cabinet, and had stood up and walked away. I turned the chair back around and sat down. I opened the manila folder. There were now 12 rules, 2 new ones, written below Rule 10 in the same typeface. 11. On your final contracted shift, you will be given the option to renew. The renewal offer will appear in the station log at 0300. You may accept or decline. If you accept, a new contract period will be added to your file. If you decline, you must complete the remainder of your shift, file all outstanding records, and leave the station by 0600. Do not return after declining. 12. If you decline renewal and the station log generates a new entry after your decline, do not read it. Close the log. Place it inside the filing cabinet, top drawer, on top of any existing documents. Leave the station. Do not bring any station property with you. The notebook must remain. These rules described an exit, a real exit. Decline and leave. Simple, clear, too clear. Every other rule had been ambiguous, layered, full of conditions and time windows and contradictions. These two were straightforward, and that straightforwardness felt like the most dangerous thing in the room. I began my shift. I logged readings. I followed every rule. The instruments drifted as usual between 0100 and 0300. The radio delivered its false forecast at 2350. Snow this time, which was absurd for early April. I noted it privately and did not relay it. At 0114, the radio voice returned. Not a forecast, not a status check. Station 31-Kilo, file reference follows, 73104-Papa 048. My file number, 31-K/P-0048, the new Rule 2. A told me to copy the numbers into the station log. I did. My hand moved across the page, and I wrote the sequence, and I initialed it, and I felt like I was signing something. Not a log entry, a document, something binding. At 0200, the printer activated. I waited 5 minutes. The strip read, Barrera, Cole Anthony's Station, 31-K shift, 7 of 7. Status, monitoring, final assessment. Renewal, eligibility, confirmed. C-log at 0300. I filed it in pending. At 0247, the tapping started, early again. The same irregular rhythm, the same patient breathing behind the door. But this time, between the taps, I heard something else. A voice, not the radio voice. A different one, quieter, closer, coming from right against the metal surface of the door, like someone pressing their mouth to the gap between the door and the frame. It said a name, not mine. A woman's name. Janet, then another tap, then silence, then the breathing. Janet Calloway, file P-0046, the name on the printout just beneath Miles Harmon's in the pending folder. The tapping continued. Between each sequence of taps, another name. Some I recognized from the folder, some I didn't. Each one spoken softly, carefully, with the precision of someone reading from a list. As though the thing outside the door was doing its own roll call, its own inventory. At 0300, the tapping stopped. I looked at the station log. Beneath my last entry, a new line had appeared. Not in my handwriting, not in the handwriting that mimicked mine. In a different hand, entirely smaller, more precise, almost mechanical in its regularity. Renewal offer, Technician Barrera, CA. Your initial contract concludes at 0600 today. Station 31-Kilo extends an offer of renewal for an additional 30-day period under existing terms. To accept, write accepted below this entry and initial. To decline, write declined and initial. This offer expires at 0400 Aux. 1 hour to decide. I looked around the monitoring room. The humming equipment, the green indicator light on the radio, the filing cabinet with its silver triangle, the black notebook I had never opened. I thought about the 47 names in the pending folder. I thought about Miles Harmon's note, the urgency in his handwriting, the apology at the end. I thought about the voice outside the door reading names like an attendance sheet. I thought about my own name on a printout, my own file in the current drawer, my status moving from monitoring to final assessment like a performance review in some impossible bureaucracy. I thought about what retention initiated really meant. I didn't know. I still don't. But I knew that every person in that folder had presumably been offered this same choice, and every person in that folder had either accepted or declined, and had their decline overridden by something that didn't recognize the word no, except Miles. Miles had gotten out. Miles had left a note. Miles had declined and survived. But Miles had also said that his status was retention initiated, which meant the station had started the process on him. So how had he escaped? What had he done differently? I looked at his note again, the index card I'd kept in my jacket pocket all week. The rules will protect you if you follow them. I had followed every rule, every single one. I had logged false readings. I had filed printouts. I had sat in the dark when the pressure dropped. I had never opened the door, never looked through the window, never corrected the rules, and my status had stayed at monitoring, never retention. The station had reviewed me on night 4 and decided retention was not yet warranted because I had been cooperative, because I had followed the protocol, because I had not opened the notebook. The notebook was the test. It had been the test all along. Every other rule was structure, the framework of the station's system, the procedures that kept the archive running, but the notebook was the variable, the thing the station set in front of every technician to see what they would do. Open it and you see the archive's true contents, the names, the photographs, the records of everyone who came before you. And once you've seen it, you're part of it. You've read the file, you're inside the record. Retention initiated. Don't open it, and you remain outside, monitoring, a temporary participant, someone who contributed to the archive but never fully entered it. At 03:34, I picked up my pen. I turned to the renewal offer in the station log. I wrote, declined. I initialed it, CAB. The moment I finished the last letter, every light in the station went out. Not a power failure, the equipment was still running, I could hear it, and the green indicator light on the radio was still glowing. Just the lights, the overheads, the desk lamp, all of them, simultaneously dark. I sat in the near blackness, lit only by the monitor screens and the radio's green eye, and I waited. The filing cabinet unlocked. The thunk was louder than before, not just a bolt sliding, but something heavy shifting inside, like the drawers were rearranging themselves. I heard paper moving, the dry whisper of pages sliding against pages, folders opening and closing, the soft mechanical shuffle of an archive reorganizing itself. Then the printer activated. In the darkness, the sound of it was sharp and alien. It ran for a long time, not an 8-inch strip, but a continuous feed, page after page, the paper piling onto the floor. I couldn't see what it was printing. I didn't try to read it. Rule 12 had told me not to read any new entries after my decline, and I extended that principle to everything the station produced. At 03:51, the radio spoke. Station 3, 1-Kilo. Technician Barrera, Cole Anthony, status update, monitoring terminated, contract concluded. File 31-K/P-0048, status, declined, filed under completed. No further action. The lights came back on. I looked at the monitoring room. Everything was exactly as it had been. The filing cabinet was closed. The printer was silent, its tray empty. No paper on the floor, no continuous feed, nothing, as if it had never run. The desk lamp was on. The overhead lights were on. The black notebook was gone. The desk drawer was empty. The desk surface was clear. The notebook had been right beside me, and now it was gone, and I hadn't heard it move, hadn't felt anything, hadn't seen a hand or a shadow or a presence take it. I looked at the filing cabinet, bottom drawer. Rule 9 had said to put the notebook behind the folder labeled completed. The notebook had gone where the rules said it should go. It had filed itself. I spent the remaining 2 hours of my shift doing exactly what the rules required. I logged readings. I initialed entries. I kept the station running. At 0600, I closed the station log and placed it in the filing cabinet's top drawer, as Rule 12 instructed. I did not look at the final entries. I did not review the pending folder. I did not open the completed drawer. I turned off the desk lamp. I walked to the door. I unlocked it and stepped outside into the morning. The sun was up. The grass was moving in a light breeze. The anemometer on the roof was turning slowly, matching the actual wind for the first time in 7 days. I got in my truck. I drove through the gate. I did not look back. That was 9 months ago. I went back to Wichita. I got a job at a hardware store. I sleep with the lights on, but I sleep. I don't listen to NOAA radio. I don't check weather forecasts. If someone mentions the barometric pressure, I leave the room. For 9 months, I told myself it was over. My file said declined. My status said completed. The station had let me go. Then, last Tuesday, I found the notebook. It was in my glove compartment, the black cover, the silver triangle, exactly as it had been on the desk at Station 31 Kilo. I hadn't brought it with me. Rule 12 said not to take station property. I hadn't. I was certain, but it was there, and it was open to a page near the middle, and on that page, in handwriting that was almost mine, the same almost mine script that had appeared in the station log, was a single line: your report is overdue. Below that, in smaller text, file 3, 1-K/P-00048, status, decline, reclassification, pending review, reclassification, pending review. 9 months after I walked away, the archive was reconsidering its decision. I closed the notebook. I should have burned it. I should have thrown it out the window on the highway. But I didn't, because Miles Harmon's note was still in my jacket pocket, and his last line kept running through my head. I'm sorry I didn't warn you before you started. And I realized that Miles hadn't escaped either. Not really. He'd declined. He'd left. And then he'd written that note and sealed it in an envelope and driven back to the station and placed it in the orientation folder for the next technician. He went back. After everything, he went back. Because the station called him back. Because his file was reclassified too. I don't know where Miles Harmon is now. I've looked. There's no record of him. No social media, no address, no obituary. Just a line in a folder in a filing cabinet in a concrete building in a field in Kansas. I'm recording this because I think the notebook is a door. I think the station sent it to me because the archive isn't finished with my file. I think declined was never a permanent status. It was a deferral, a pause. And now the pause is ending. The notebook is sitting on my kitchen table right now. I haven't opened it again since Tuesday, but this morning, when I came downstairs, it was open to a different page, a page with a photograph, a Polaroid, faded, showing the interior of a monitoring room, a desk, a chair, a radio console with a green indicator light, and someone sitting in the chair, facing away from the camera, wearing a jacket I recognize because it's hanging in my closet right now. I don't know when that photograph was taken. I don't know who took it. I don't know how a picture of me sitting in that chair exists when there were no cameras in the station and I was alone every night. But the photograph is time-stamped. In the white border at the bottom, in faded blue ink, it reads 31-K/P-0048, night 4/01/00, retention review. I was being watched during the review. The station was in the room with me, close enough to take a photograph, and I never knew. If you work at a weather station or a relay station or any remote monitoring facility where the overnight shift comes with a folder of rules, read them carefully, follow them exactly, and if you find a black notebook with a silver triangle on the cover, don't open it. Put it away. Follow the rules. But understand this. The rules are not there to protect you. The rules are there to process you. Every entry you log, every reading you file, every instruction you obey, you're not maintaining the station. You're feeding it. You're giving it your name, your handwriting, your initials, your hours, your presence, and somewhere in a cabinet you're not supposed to open, in a folder you're not supposed to read, your file is growing thicker. Mine is. I can feel it. The notebook is open again. I didn't touch it, but it's open, and there's a new page visible, and on it there's a single line in that handwriting that's almost mine. Report to station 31-Kilo. Your new contract begins tonight. I'm not going back, but I said that 9 months ago, and the notebook is here, and the page is open, and the wind outside my apartment, I just checked, is blowing from the south-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. That was the false forecast, the first one, the one the radio read on my first night. The station predicted that never matched reality. It matches now. I don't think the forecast was wrong. I think it was early. I think the station doesn't predict the weather. I think it decides it. And I think when the wind and the temperature and the pressure all match what the voice told me 9 months ago, the station's signal will reach me wherever I am. It's 9:47 p.m., the same time I sat in my truck on my first night, looking at the building, telling myself it was just a job. The notebook just added another line. Welcome back, Cole. I'm not going back. I'm not. But the wind is still blowing from the south-southwest, and the temperature outside is 42 degrees, and I can hear something faintly through the wall of my apartment from a radio. I don't own a calm voice reading a forecast for Pawnee County that hasn't been issued by any weather service on Earth, and it knows my name.